If you're looking for specialists to deliver training for research professionals or researchers, then make sure you check out the Research Adjacent directory at researchadjacent.com/directory. There you'll find trainers like me, I specialise in events and engagement, and also like our featured member of the month, research writing expert Susan Mandala. Here's Susan to tell you more.
If you're a researcher, you'll be doing a literature review. And while there's plenty of advice out there on what a review should do, guidance on how to do it is harder to come by. That's where I come in. I'm Susan Mandala, and I offer workshops on how to really write your literature review. My workshops can be tailored to specific subjects, and I also provide bespoke sessions on research writing more widely and CPD for researcher developers. Sound like something you need? Let's talk.
It's not just about us pushing boundaries, adjusting to the organization, but it's sometimes the organization adjusting to us. I'm not just a piece of data. It's my actual life. And the moment I can hide it, I can control it. The moment I pass it over to you and I don't know what you're going to do with it, I lose control of that. And I am going to pay the price for it. My big concern in the current political environment that the EDI element of research culture will be pushed in the background, and still institutions can say that they have been working on their research culture because it includes so many other things.
Hello there, I'm Sarah McCluskey, and this is Research Adjacent. Each episode, I talk to amazing research adjacent professionals about what they do and why it makes a difference. Keep listening to find out why we think the research adjacent space is where the real magic happens. Hello and welcome to Research Adjacent. I am, as always, your host Sarah McCluskey. Today I'm delighted to introduce you to diversity and inclusion expert Jakob Feldtfos Christensen. Jakob is a research manager at the Defaktum Research Centre in Denmark, an independent consultant, host of the Diversity in Research podcast, and now an author. His book, Diversity Leadership for Research Managers, has just been released. In our conversation, we talk about why research managers have more influence than they might think, why more data is not the answer, and how to take steps in the right direction, even though the complexity of diversity can feel overwhelming at times. I've been a guest on Jakob's podcast talking about the lack of diversity amongst the research adjacent workforce, and if you are interested in that, I'll include a link to that episode in the show notes. So it was fantastic to be able to return the favour and take time to talk about his book and what research professionals can do to create and support more diverse and inclusive research environments. Listen on to hear Jakob's story. Welcome along to the podcast, Jakob. It's fantastic to have you here. First of all, can you tell our audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, and thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure. Yeah, so my name is Jakob, and I'm a research manager been so for almost 15 years now. God, it's been long, hasn't it? And apart from being a research manager here in Denmark, I started my career at Aarhus University back in the day, and now working at Defaktum, a research center in Central Denmark region. I also have Diversity Unity, a small consultancy that works with making diversity and internationalization work in research and research management. And also, now we're on a podcast, co-host the Diversity in Research podcast with Lachlan Stephen Smith, where we had you as a guest.
Yep.
And then I have, based on the work on the podcast, the consultancy we have driven, the training we have run, I have written a book called Diversity Leadership for Research Managers, a practical guide that'll be out on Emerald Publishing here in June this year.
Fantastic. Yeah, lots to get into there. So first of all, clearly you've got the kind of day job, but everything that you're doing around the day job relates to diversity.
Yeah.
And diversity, particularly within the research world. Why is this something that's been so interesting to you?
Yeah, so I think I have two reasons. I should perhaps say we always link diversity to internationalization because internationalization is like a new normal in research today. And I think a couple of things. First of all, I studied history of religion back in university many years ago when I was young and handsome. Now I'm only handsome. And so I have an interest in internationalization, cultural differences, and stuff like that. On a personal level, as a gay man, I could see when I entered into research management that there wasn't discussions that weren't being had relating to internationalization, what could be done and couldn't be done, and perspectives that I just didn't see being mentioned in the research. And then I was part of the first cohort of the IAMA CRM, Certification in Research Management. And we had a module on gender and diversity. And of course, we basically just talked about gender. And that's, of course, because that's when we say diversity in a European research context is primarily gender, but at least back then, 10 years ago. And as a gay man, I was like, yeah, I think it's a bit more complicated than that. So I started developing this interest for the topic back then already. And then it slowly developed more, started reading. I gave a presentation on the topic back in, I think in 2007, 70, something like that, at the INOMS conference in Edinburgh, where I met Lachlan, who was in the audience, and then we started writing a bit about it. And then in the end, I founded Diversity Unity to see if we could broaden out the agenda a bit more and also say that, because I think a lot of the challenges that, and going perhaps a bit into the book already here, is I think one of the challenges is that when we talk about diversity, so much of it is focused on HR. And that is good. And they clearly have a role in this. But HR solves a task within the institution. But most research is based on external research funding. It happens interinstitutionally, often internationally. And then we can come and say all we want about our national rules. We have made a gender equality plan that says that we promote this and that. And we want an intersectional approach and promote LGBTQ plus issues. If we have a partner in Saudi Arabia where being gay is illegal, HR can't solve that.
Yeah.
That's not an HR problem. So I think there is a big problem here. Nobody's really equipped to use it. And too often it lands with the individual researcher and often with the research manager, either on the pre-award stage or post-award stage, and they are left to solve it. And we haven't equipped them with any kind of skills to do so.
Yeah, I think certainly a lot of jobs that research managers are doing, they're doing without kind of formal training in them. But this definitely one of them. And as you say, HR really is only looking at recruitment and then employees of that organization. And
exactly.
As you say, research now, it's done across institutions, across international borders. It's also with not just researchers, but also community partners and other organizations, might be industry, all sorts of things coming together in the mix. And of course, all of those people with all of their diverse and wonderful contributions to bring to it, but without a framework for how to do that.
And of course, and then we have to navigate in the European context, the AI Act, GDPR. You have all sorts of national and international legislations that can support and make it difficult for us that we have to look at in a research project context that you don't necessarily always have to pay a lot of attention to in HR. So it's not like I have a problem with HR or I think they're doing a terrible job. I think they're doing exactly the job they're supposed to do. The problem is just that in today's modern research, I just don't think that they are always the people who have the task and don't necessarily should have the task. And then we need to have a proper discussion about how do we actually solve it without succumbing to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've said this book, as you said, the title of it, Diversity Leadership for Research Managers. Why focus on research managers specifically?
Yeah, I think, first of all, because I think that it is, I think because I'm a research manager, so it's what I know, so I can, it's a basic thing to say. And both to say, I think we don't have the skills to solve it, which we should. Two, I also sometimes think that we undersell ourselves a bit as a profession and sometimes leave it to be somewhere people moving budgets, which we do as well, and complete forms and do paperwork, which we do as well. But I also think that we do a lot of other things, and we should be proud of that and push our role in that. I also, and this was not so much a part of it when I started writing the book, but things, of course, developed over a 2-year period, year and a half writing it on AI to say, I think there are a lot of the tasks that research managers do today on the administrative side, both with completing forms, looking for relevant calls, screening things, commenting on proposals. You can't leave it all to AI, but you definitely have AI tools that could reduce the number of research managers needed. What can't be taken away and solved by AI is the interpersonal relationship. So I also think this is also a way of future-proofing the profession in a changing time. And I also think that a lot of the research management or thoughts about research management happened in a time where we had this idea about universities being a bit outside the real world, like science diplomacy, blah, 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 all these things. So the political reality of the real world didn't apply. That's no longer the case. And particularly in a time of global tension, I think it's really important that we have the proper vocabulary and skills to solve some of these things that are challenges that will only grow in the coming years.
Yeah. Oh, that the importance of the interpersonal skills that research professionals have comes up again and again on this podcast. And in so many cases, these roles are the glue that holds everything together, and that's connecting the people and the resources and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, interpersonal skills really powerful.
But if I could just interrupt you and just say that I think, and I'm creating a bit of a straw man here, I'm well aware, but no, but it's in the interpersonal, we often reduce that in quotations to being like about being polite, individual person-to-person relationship, and that is important as well. I think one of the important points for me with the book is to say there's a structural element to this about being, if we look at minorities, that's not just the individual, it is a population group. If we look at international collaborations, there's a cultural element to this. Now, we shouldn't reduce persons to either their ethnicity or being part of an underrepresented group, but just to say it's more than being polite and nice. There's structural elements to this, and when there's structural elements, we can work with it and we can create skills to work with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing, again, there was a whole episode of the podcast last year about how research professionals are often in roles where they can actually have quite a lot of influence, or they can need to have a lot of influence. Their role requires them to persuade people to do stuff that they don't necessarily want to do some of the time, even if they don't have the official authority, even if they're not the head of department or the director of some.
And also it depends on, because research managers is, of course, a lot of different things, which I talk about in the book as well. So when I was at Aarhus University in my first job as a research manager, I was part of a big research support office, only working pre-award and narrow 2 faculties, but had a ton of researchers that I interacted with. In my current job, I am the research support office. I'm the only one in the department. Now we have some finance people. I'm lying a bit here, but still my role and the tasks I have are much more diverse than when you're in a big research support office at a comprehensive university in Europe. So it's just to say, so particularly I think in people who are in roles like me, who will be probably much more integrated into a department or what kind of structure you would be embedded in, will have some roles where you can play a much bigger role in some of these issues as well.
That makes a good case for why research managers, research professionals are important people to work with. Now, one thing that you say in the book that I really love the turn of phrase, which is that diversity is complex, but it's not complicated. I wonder if you could tell us a bit more what you mean by that.
Yeah, and I think it's just to acknowledge, because I think a lot of people, when we go do training or consultancy or give a keynote, whatever it might be, I think one of the things is that we can see that people are a bit scared about touching on this because it's also, and you're in the UK, diversity is very political. At least some identities are currently incredibly politicized right now, which is of course the case in many countries. So there's that part of it that of course scares people a bit away, and it is complex because we have a number of identities, we have cultural issues as well. But when I say it can be complex but not complicated, is we make it complicated. When the moment you put human beings into the equation, it becomes complicated to some extent. But we can also take ourselves a bit out of the equation, and particularly if again go back to the whole skills agenda and say, actually, we need to have a proper vocabulary and we need to have proper skills how to work with this. Then it becomes less complicated because we have some tools to navigate the complexity. And I think it's important to keep those two terms a bit separated and wonder if you're faced with one of these challenges about diversity and internationalization is, am I making it complicated or more complicated than it actually is? And could we, by taking a step back or doing some of these, using some of the tools described in the book, could we manage the complexity to some level at least? It will always be complex, but we can at least, I think it's important that we make that distinction and work with it in our daily jobs so that we don't get overwhelmed and don't let the complicatedness of human beings overwhelm the actual work with a complex issue.
Yeah, you've said there that you've got tools in the book and suggestions for what sorts of things people could be doing. One of the first things you've said there is around diversity literacy.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I think it's important because I think one of the challenges, and we as underrepresented groups, and can say that as a gay man, we've created this kind of bit for ourselves, this problem that we think that the solution to everything is representation. And to some extent it is. Representation is important. Let me stress that right away, that I fully agree. But representation, being part of an underrepresented group isn't the same as having skills in the field. So I think we need to separate the things. And we also have to say, the moment we go beyond, in a European context, gender, and particularly a gender binary, and we start talking about race and LGBTQ plus issues and ethnicity, religion, age, neurodiversity, all these other issues, it becomes incredibly complex. And the moment we start talking about intersectionality, so Black gay women, for example, you get into a granularity where representation just isn't possible always. So we need to develop skills. And I think this is relevant for all research matters, but I think particularly on a pre-award stage, because it's always a bit rushed. We're always last minute before the deadline looking at this proposal. So having some level of diversity literacy in order to say, are there diversity aspects here that we should keep in mind? Problems, but also potentials. Are there some real potentials here that we could bring to life by adding a diversity dimension to it? So that is why I talk about we need to develop diversity literacy, because we can't just push it to be a question for underrepresented groups. We have a responsibility as part of the research ecosystem and supporting in research projects at different levels. And when I say diversity literacy, is both to have some knowledge, having a vocabulary to be able to talk about it, but also some tools to be able to advance the agenda in different ways, depending on where you work in the research ecosystem. And I have a full chapter, I think it's the longest chapter in the book, where I look at 4 different roles as research managers: pre-award, post-award, strategy and policy, and then as an open science advisor, to say how can you actually work with it specifically in these different in these different roles. Of course, there's a longer description, but I think that's a short version about what I mean with diversity in literacy. Also, because we have, if it's a skill, we need to have something to tie it to, but also so that we don't fall into a trap of discussing definitions endlessly.
Yeah. So I think that's it, is how do you take it from this knowledge and a language to talk about it to actually doing something constructive?
Yeah, and I think there's some we have developed some tools over the years that we use, and and they're, of course, in the book as well. So on pre-award, we've developed a whole model about how you can think about diversity and include it on different stages of a research proposal. Another tool we try to develop is a logic model for how to create an inclusive research support office. Because I think one of the other challenges that we face is that we say that diversity is something out there. It's something about in the research community or in the research itself. But I don't think we're good enough to look at research managers. Are we diverse enough? Have we created the proper inclusive environments in research support offices? So having this model to say, looking at different things that you can work on from a research support office point of view, I think is important, but also tools for analyzing if you want to launch a new initiative, actually analyzing what could be the implementation challenges for different scales. So we're trying to break it down and make it more tangible without the illusion that there are any quick fixes or any fixed solutions. Because I think that is the whole point of this, is that there are no easy solutions. Because it depends on which underrepresented groups are you working with here. And if it's if you're supporting a research project, which countries, which nationalities, legislations are involved here? How person-centered is it? If it's a project on theoretical mathematics, we probably don't have a lot of GDPR issues with the data collected in the project. We still have issues with the people involved in it. But it's just to say that's, of course, different if we're looking at inclusive clinical trials in project. So it has been and that is also one of the challenges I've had writing it and discussed a lot with myself and the people I have reading it. Does it become too abstract? And I try to make it tangible by examples, but it is a lot of frameworks and questions to ask more than it is specific solutions, because the solutions are not there, and anyone telling you so is lying.
Yeah.
But still trying to make it as tangible as possible, making it into steps and breaking it a bit down into smaller pieces that also, as we talked about, research managers on many different things. So make it tangible for people to do something about it, no matter how many stars they have on their shoulders.
Yeah. It's interesting you say there. That totally resonates with me, that we often think about how to make the research diverse. So as you say, if you're recruiting for a study, you'll be very careful about who are the people that you want to be represented and how do you make that fair and how do you make that equal. And much less good. And also, I think it happens, as you say, with HR and recruitment as well. So that then again, the research teams that's had been considered. But I definitely have noticed how rarely we turn that lens on ourselves. And I'm not the only person to raise it, but it doesn't get talked about very much. That this research management, research professionals world, in the UK at least, is very female.
Yeah.
And nobody seems to ask any questions about that and ask what might be the biases and assumptions that come along with having a group of people that are predominantly female. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying nobody seems to ask any
No.
questions
And when they do, I have a good friend who tried raising the question in an armor context, and the room went absolutely silent.
Yeah, I've had a similar reaction.
Nobody and didn't see a problem with it and didn't see any reason to discuss it. And I know it's the same. It's a prayer same in the US, where you can also see there can be also a race dimension to it. As someone said, if you go to the university, you'll see a lot of white male professors. If you go to a research professional conference, you will see a lot of black women.
And I think that it sometimes, as you say, it's not about necessarily saying this is what has to be done.
No.
But sometimes just take a look around and ask questions.
And those are the visible things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because one of the points we always bring to training and in other contexts is you never know who's in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody's got a personal story, is complicated in some way,
exactly.
even if it's not, as you say, visible characteristics, even if it's not these what in the UK are called protected characteristics. People have hidden disabilities or caring responsibilities or things like that which affect how they show up.
Yeah. And I think the moment we don't recognize that, we leave all the responsibility for thriving on underrepresented groups.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that you mention in the book, don't you? And that this is something, it's long been said for certain groups, like it's not for that underrepresented group themselves to solve the problem. But that can leave people, and I totally agree with that, but it can also leave people floundering as to what to do, because certainly in the engagement world that I come from, there's this, and also the disability, as it comes from the disability word, this idea of nothing about us without us. So you want to include those people, definitely, and listen to them and listen to their perspectives and their point of views. But I agree that it's not their responsibility to solve the problem. So how do we juggle that situation?
Yeah, exactly. And also, and how do we juggle it when we realize we need to do something 3 days before a deadline on a proposal? We can't then we don't have time to create an advisory board and call a meeting in 3 weeks' time and discuss this. We need to be able to do something on our own, not as an excuse not to involve people, but a combination of both. And also, when you have the representation, you can't make one person represent a full group. I can't represent the entire LGBTQ plus community. I can't even represent the gay men community, because I'm a white gay man in Denmark. It's probably one of the easiest places to be a gay man, and I'm quite gender conforming and a cis man. So if I don't tell people I'm gay, some people won't necessarily notice it. So in that sense, I'm not necessarily a very good representative, even in a Danish context, which is one thing we actually need skills. And I would also say white gay men is probably the one group in the LGBTQ plus community we don't need any more representation from. I should stay on the sideline and let other people come to the table and bring their perspective. But just to say, when we go into this, it is a complex matter. And again, that's why we need the skills around it. Also to acknowledge the limitations about what we are doing. And that is not to say that if we can't do it all. The point in the book is we easily make this everything everywhere all at once problem. And the point is to say that it's okay to be pragmatic. We have to start somewhere. We can start with one group, or we can start in one project, or we can start with one dimension of the proposal, or start doing one thing in our consortium meetings. Small steps are steps, and taking small steps in this field, because it's new and it's complex and sensitive. Every small step we take is leadership.
Yeah. And when you say small steps, one of the things that often comes up is people then want data before they do anything. Why can that be a bit problematic?
First of all, I think we have there are a ton of issues in that, but let's focus on a couple of them. One thing is, of course, the granularity. If you start collecting data, and if we go into intersectionality, if we make it about who are the Black lesbian women with a disability,
Yeah.
there's if there are
There are any. Yeah.
there's
It might just be
probably
one.
just one or two.
Yeah.
So we're easily naming them and outing people. Now, some of this is visible. You probably, if they were in a wheelchair, you have an idea that they have some sort of disability. But you also have disabilities who are not visible. So in that sense, you easily out people when we go into that. And if we don't go into granularity and have it two big groups, somebody may not really be interesting data you can use. So in that sense, there's one problem with that. The second is on an institutional level, I should say, because that's always the first question we get from, or comment we get from institutional leadership when we're out doing work. We need more data on our institution before we can do work. And so, first of all, the data is out there. We know what all the problems are. So you can actually act upon general knowledge and create an inclusive culture. And also, the whole point of this is that we're building trust. We're in this situation because we didn't build trust, and most underrepresented groups don't trust institutions because we've faced too much pushback, harassment, etc., etc. So the first step in building trust is that the institution does something. Only when I trust you, if I can see you're serious about it, I am going to trust you with my data. Because for me as a gay man, it's not data. It's my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not just a piece of data. It's my actual life. And the moment I can hide it, I can control it. The moment I pass it over to you and I don't know what you're going to do with it, I lose control of that. And I am going to pay the price for it. If there is harassment and then you collect the data, it's out there and you can see there's a number of gay men and we can come out and then harassment starts and the institution say, oh, we didn't think this was happening. We don't know what to do with it. And so I think, first of all, I don't think the data is necessary. And second of all, it's the second step.
Yeah. Yeah. Not the first thing. And I think it's this, as you say, creating these spaces where people feel safe. This comes up so much, and I do a lot of event management, and that's one of the things that's always a big priority for me is how do I make everybody feel included and safe? It is a big thing. But it also connects to the conversations that are going on at the moment, certainly in the UK, about research culture and what it means to change research culture. And this is a really big part of that, isn't it? And
it is.
And people keep saying things like, oh, but how do we measure if we've changed research culture? And I do understand that it's a problem because it's more of a feeling than something you can measure. But I think everybody knows it when they feel it.
Yeah. And I also think, and one of the problems is that the only thing you can really, my point would be that you can only measure it in one way of, if we look at it on an institutional level, on belonging. And it is incredibly frustrating that you can do all sorts of initiatives and implement all sorts of things, and still I might not feel like I belong.
Yeah.
And that it's up to other people to decide whether you did a good enough job. I think is challenging for people. They want some sort of neutral measure that they can control, and you can't. But I also think, and I've covered it a bit in the book as well, I do have a bit of a problem with the whole research culture term because this part is part of it on diversity and underrepresented groups is so politicized and it's so sensitive and it's challenging to see what to measure, etc., etc. It's easy for institutions to say that we'll park that for a moment and then we'll work with open science.
Yeah.
Because that's also research culture. And then suddenly when you go back to them and face, but you haven't done anything about this. Oh, but we have worked with research culture. Yeah. My big concern in the current political environment and with global tensions, etc., that the EDI element of research culture will be pushed in the background, and still institutions can say that they have been working on their research culture because it includes so many other things. So we kind in giving them a get out of jail free card on this topic. That is my big concern.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think that culture, I think anybody would, when you think about a workplace culture, we think about, as you say, how you feel about going to work, whether you feel like you belong, whether it's not about whether or not people can read the publications that come out of the organization. But some of those things, I understand this. Oh, it's just this cultural built-in thing to want to measure things and put them on scales and score it. And partly it's just baked into the brains of academics, isn't it? That's how you demonstrate anything. But it's
and
not
then
how
also
people live.
No, and then there's also the whole discussion about qualitative and quantitative data. Because when we need to talk about data, we have this idea that it has to be quantitative. And in this case, I think there is a strong case for qualitative data and setting up some correct setups, whether through focus groups or individual interviews, or it could be surveys as well. This would, of course, require people out. But again, if you want to measure it, the first step is still that you show some initiative, because in order to measure it, you need people to trust you.
Yeah, which comes back to that sense of belonging again, doesn't it?
It does. But I see the point with research culture, and I would say that all the people I know that work with research culture are aware of this and try to go beyond those challenges, but it's of course not always up to them to decide that. Yeah. I have my concerns, but
as you say, I think a lot of people trying to do that bottom-up work.
Yeah.
But only getting so far when the system doesn't allow it.
It has its limitations, and because at some point you need stronger support from leadership, and have some suggestions for that in the book as well. But still, I think it's important not to let that discourage people from taking initiative and doing something, and remembering that even the small steps in something like this can make one hell of a difference for pardon my French, for people from underrepresented groups. Even the smallest things, to have other people recognize that it's not just about us pushing boundaries and pushing the organization or adjusting to the organization, but it's sometimes the organization adjusting to us. And that can be on very small scale and still be a very meaningful change for the individual. And then you have something to build on. I think that's more important than believing that we have to do everything everywhere all at once.
Leading on from that, I'm really interested to hear your answer to this question, which is, if you had a magic wand, what would you change about the world that you work in?
Only one thing. I think I would if we let's stick within the area of what we discussed today. I think world peace would probably be the much needed at this point.
Do with that, right?
I don't think one magic wand would be enough for
depends
for that
what you
right
use
now.
It for, but
But in the context of the discussion here today, I think if we could make the research ecosystem broadly realize that diversity and internationalization are two agendas that don't go very well hand in hand, and we need actual skill to solve it beyond good intentions, I think that would be a tremendous step forward.
Sounds like an excellent use of the magic wand.
Perhaps a very pragmatic use.
Very pragmatic.
I think that, but of course, it would be best to say that we had to know everybody could work across cultures, and all underrepresented groups were accepted everywhere. Again, that would be the ideal situation, and then there was absolutely no need for me or my book. But in a realistic setting, I think that would be something I think could make it a real discussion. So we had proper discussions about the issues without blaming people, groups, or not creating false dichotomies, but just having a real discussion about how the real world actually looks because then we can work with it. It won't be easy, but then at least we can work with it in a way that we can't, as long as we pretend like there is one shared academic culture everywhere, which next time I hear someone say that, I'm going to scream. And we can just do these things by being polite to everybody. Having proper, honest conversations, polite but honest conversation about it, because then we can be ambitious but pragmatic.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Definitely just talking about it more, I think, would make a big difference, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
For coming along. If people want to find out more about you, the work you do, your book, where can they find all of those things?
Yeah, I think the best place to find out more about what we do is on diversityunity.com. It's a website. Always look me up on LinkedIn. That's where we're most active. And then you can find our podcast if you're interested in this little area of research and research management. Wherever you listen to podcasts, where you have listened to this one.
Yes.
You can probably find us as well with the Diversity in Research podcast. So that's it. And I'll be shamelessly promoting the book on LinkedIn and everywhere else if people want the link to where they can find it, and tell their home institutions that the library should buy it as well.
Fantastic. We shall put all of those links in the show notes so people can find them there. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Research Adjacent. If you're listening in a podcast app, please check you're subscribed and then use the links in the episode description to find full show notes and to follow the podcast on LinkedIn. You can also find all the links and other episodes at www.researchadjacent.com. Research Adjacent is presented and produced by Sarah McCluskey, and the theme music is by Lemon Music Studios on Pixabay. And you, yes you, get a big gold star for listening right to the end. See you next time. Are you still there? If so, I'm guessing you've either got your hands full or you have been really loving the conversation. And I love helping people to have conversations. Specifically, I organise, facilitate and train people to run events, workshops and meetings that get people talking about research. If this sounds like something you need help with, then get in touch. Pop over to sarahmccluskey.com or click the link in the show notes.